because I forgot to do that the other day. And we should now be recording and streaming. So we are public and recording. So we will call this November 12th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order at 7:06 p.m.
Yes, I can see
we'll do a
on
roll
my
call.
screen that we're recording and streaming.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Ken,
Good deal.
Yes.
Kay,
Yes.
Jim,
I
Mayor.
don't see him on yet. I'm here. And you're obviously here.
I am.
And Rick is on as well. So, all right. First item is approval of the minutes from March 12th.
And I move to approve them as written.
All right.
I read through them and I have no discussion or problem with them, so I approve them as well.
All right. I will we'll call that a motion and a second, and I will also vote yes that we approve them. All right. Visitors, Rick, you got anything for us at the moment?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. So first business item, old business. This is the meeting we were trying to have back in March in our systematic evaluation of short-term rentals and whether or not we need to do something or want to do something. We've heard from owners, we've heard from residents, and then the third part was going to be kind of looking at what other communities are doing with regards to them. The thought would be then we'll look at some of that tonight and have some brief discussion about that, but we're not going to make a decision on whether or not we want the village to do anything with regards to short-term rentals. That'll be the next meeting where it'll more or less be the only agenda item so that we have plenty of time to discuss it and the pros and cons. So we will move on with that. So Terry, I'll turn it over to you. You sent out information. Kay, I know you got it because you had some questions on those. I have that email up. So we will address those as well. But Terry, if you want to just give us an overview, how you pulled information together, where you looked at, and if you talked to anybody that maybe, smaller communities that weren't included on here because they either aren't doing anything or in process or anything like that, and give us that overview.
Okay. So first of all, you had two sources, written sources. One from the city of Dublin, which included, quite a few people, and it was a really in-depth study, which I think was really good. And that was done in 2019. And then you had some questions and answers from the city of Columbus that they have received about short-term rentals and bread and breakfast. And then you have additional information on what Columbus requires. I think that the best way to go about this, since it's so much information, is just to open up the floor for questions about what you saw, because I'm sorry?
I was going to say, if that's the case, why don't we just start to work through some of Kay's questions that she sent in?
That's what I was going to suggest, because I think there's a lot of information here. Some of it's repetitive. I think I would like, as we look through this, is not to think of today's atmosphere, but think of tomorrow's atmosphere, meaning this is not pro or against anything that is currently in business, but more or less, what do we do going forward? Because I firmly believe, like Kay and I've had a conversation, that Baltimore is going to become, will grow larger, and we'll see more of these kind of businesses. So I think we need to really kind of have a goal in mind. You know, what is it that we really want to do? And I think we need to look at it at a high level goal and not just at the current status.
Right, and that's what our next meeting conversation will be about.
So that's where I'm at. So, okay, go ahead,
All right.
Mayor.
All right, so the first question was, and I agree, the Dublin one, well, I'm just going to call it the Dublin study because that's essentially
Yes.
what it was. And they evaluated a lot of other municipalities.
Yes, they
So
did.
they went through and Kay, your first question on here was our fire marshal's response. The Dublin study indicated that, well, for the city of Dublin, they themselves did not the staff there did not recommend pursuing any short-term rental regulation. And then they went into the study, and part of that was with the fire code and what our fire marshal's response to that is. I have not had a conversation with Rob or Casey about short-term rentals in the village. I imagine I imagine they are kind of aware of them, but there's only a couple. If it is something that you guys want to have them provide information on for our next meeting when we're discussing it, I'm happy to reach out to them and get some information from them or invite them to that meeting to answer any questions. Because like I said, I have not had any conversation. I don't know if Terry has or not.
I have.
Okay.
And so let me tell you what I know about inspections as far as the fire inspections. Casey and I have had a conversation about that. They do not do inspections on residential, meaning that the only quote unquote fire restrictions we would have would be in our international property code maintenance. Some of those we could not use because I nor my staff are certified. So they do not do residential inspections. They do businesses and commercial. So if we would deem this to be a business, whether it be a short-term rental or a bed and breakfast, then the paperwork would then be sent to Fairfield County Building Department. Included in their inspections is a fire inspection. So in other words, they would come in and look for those items through that commercial or / business inspection. But ours, sometimes Casey's involved, sometimes he isn't. It just depends.
Well, would they do that if we're talking a Airbnb that is a room rental versus a whole building? Does that room rental convert it from a residential property to a commercial property that it would do a business inspection? Because I don't think Columbus does that, because I know some of the fire inspectors up there.
Right. So I guess that's what we have to decide. One of the things that next year when we start talking through the zoning code, you're going to see I hit definitions a lot. I think that's something we need to define. And the first definition is it considered a business. If it is considered a business.
But I guess we allow home businesses now and they don't get fire inspections, correct?
That's correct. For a home occupation. That is correct.
But the difference here is, in my mind, is, you might have a customer coming in for short term, but not overnight, not sleeping there. I don't know what anybody else's thoughts are, but it seems to me there should be some kind of fire inspection because of that situation. If we need to deem it not necessarily a commercial property, but a commercial enterprise, I would think that would be necessary.
Right, because for those that, I guess an easy way, if in our discussion at the next meeting, one way to essentially regulate them out would be to say, if you have this, your residential property becomes a commercial property, and that's going to be bad for property owners and property values, and just change the entire dynamic of some of the zoning stuff, because they simply wouldn't be allowed. So that's not exactly something that I think we should do. if you want to look at it maybe in the future as a commercial enterprise so that it gets one defined. But as far as if this activity is going on in a residential property, it automatically converts it to a commercial property. I think that's a dangerous ground to start to head towards.
I prefer
I
that we
agree.
use the terminology business rather than commercial.
Commercial.
And so,
And that might be a better way because we have home businesses that are allowed in residential areas.
yeah, it doesn't have to be rezoned to be the home of a business, but if you turn it into, if you use that term commercial, then you're into zoning terminology, right, Terry?
Correct.
So,
Right. Okay. So I guess that's kind of where we're at on the fire stuff right now.
okay.
As we're talking about this or before the next meeting, because I know everyone will think about it a little more. If you want us to invite Rob or Casey to that meeting as well to answer any follow-up questions, just let us know. Okay, your next question was, well, noted that at least in Dublin on police limited activity or calls for service for these short-term rentals, the police weren't asking for legislation at that time. I think the same more or less holds here in Baltimore right now. The only ones we know about, we don't have police interactions at. That said, there is we have the one rental that is a short-term rental that is not on the online sites. It's not an Airbnb or the VRBO or whatever it was that one of the neighbors came in and talked about. I think they had some code issues that the neighbors were concerned about. And there is a new property over, I want to say it's over closer to the schools that has recently become more of a, how the chief put it, felony central. That it is, they have made numerous runs to this house. They think it's a weekly or monthly rental type situation. But our police activity is not anywhere near where I think it would be to call for, we needed to adopt legislation for this just based solely on police activity. We don't have those calls for service to do that. And then your next question was talking about the transit occupancy tax, the bed tax. You know, I will say that yes, they should be reporting it. I don't know if they are. Tax filings are confidential. We get statistics and numbers, but I can't go and say for sure that this person did or did not file. The only thing we can do is ask the tax commissioner, which is Rita, and say, hey, we know we have these. Did they file taxes? You know, most of, I think the Airbnb ones, because they have all the regulations, are probably going to have their taxes remitted. It's the ones that, the short-term rentals that aren't advertising online that we might have problems with. Quite frankly, we have a lot of landlords that, what was it, Terry, 3 years ago, we started to crack down on landlords. And we got a lot of phone calls from people saying, well, how did you find out I own this house? And, you know, come to find out they've been renting it and not paying taxes on it, on their rental income. So, you know, it is something. The caveat to that is if we don't know it exists, we don't know to tell the tax commissioner to make sure that they're paying it, which could lend a way towards, you know, is it something that you just register? Let us know that it's there. But I can't say for certain if they are getting paid, though the ones that we know of, I think, are so new that they wouldn't have any prior tax filings. It would all just be, they would file this year for last year, I think, would be the first time we would see any of that. So, and then let's see, you said that on page 7, which was the final page before the Dublin paper got
Conclusion,
into
yes.
it. Yeah, that their recommendation was to maintain the status quo with a policy that outlines city expectations in a manner that short-term rentals will be operated. And that's kind of what our next meeting will be about. We've heard from owners. We've heard from owner operators of Airbnbs. We've heard from residents. We know we have at least one short-term rental that is not an Airbnb, so it doesn't have those built-in protections that an Airbnb has. So at the next meeting, it'll be the open discussion of, is this, do we want to do something? Do we take a Dublin approach and maintain status quo and do nothing? Do we modify what we have, or do we have to look at, creating our own policy based on whatever we think is best for the village? Columbus
I wouldn't
is.
say that Dublin said that they were doing nothing. They did adopt a policy. They didn't institute any legislation or require a permit or a registration, but they, came up with their guidelines and then distributed those to people who intend to operate. Then if that becomes a concern, then they're ready to come back and decide legislation is needed.
Right. And to me, that's a weasel way out of it, because if you're going to create a policy without any mechanism to enforce it, then why are we going to create the policy? If we're going to create a policy or a set of guidelines, then we should have a means to enforce it one way or the other. If we're going to go through that effort, and to me, it's sometimes easier if we're talking about a policy and then you come back later. Sometimes it's easier to try to put a policy in place beforehand than it is to create one after a problem arises. But, I think we also have different population bases than Dublin. I don't know Dublin's rental occupancy rate off the top of my head, but I'd be willing to bet it's not near the 50% that we have. And so one of the concerns we have, one of the few things I liked in the Columbus Code was that if you were running a short-term rental, you had to be the owner of it. You either had to be the owner of the building or it had to be an owner-occupied one. Because we've got 50% rentals here in Baltimore, it would be nothing for someone to go rent a home for $800 a month and then turn around and make it a short-term rental. And now we're a couple steps away from the owner. And so that is something we got to think about as well. Our population differences between us and Dublin.
Well, Brad, this is Jim
Yeah.
O'Connell. If you go in and you start something with long-term rentals in the village, why couldn't you put this short-term owner in that policy? Because it just, to me, in looking at the stuff, it seems as though it could be very difficult to manage. Now we only have 2, but it still would be difficult to manage and see how often is it rented, or are you getting it? I don't know whether it's cost effective, who's going to do that?
Right,
I
and
asked a
that-
question like that to Terry. Did you find out what their permit cost is, Terry?
Oh, I thought I sent that to you. Okay, let me look and see what I thought I sent it to you.
So, but-
I'll look that up. Continue talking.
yeah, and Jim, that is something we got to be cognizant of too. You know, right now we have 2 or 3 or, you know, just a couple. And are we, on one hand, does this create more work for us than, you know, and create more work for us than is needed for those couple? But at the same time, if all of a sudden, because of the way they pop up, you could have 20, is it better to do that and put it in place? You know, again, Dublin, their process was basically those guidelines. It reads like they're ready to have the legislation if they need it. If someone were to come in and they were to have problems pop up, it wouldn't surprise me that their ordinance is already drafted and they just have to add a number and send it through committee. But you're right. It is something we gotta think about. You know, with so few, again, wanting to be, you know, expense neutral, revenue neutral on the village side here, and being very cognizant of Terry's time, because she's the one that this would all fall onto, and she has enough to do as it is. Is it creating more with little benefit?
And the application fee, and I sent this back to you on the 3rd, Kay. The application fee is $20. For a primary resident permit fee is $75, and for a non-primary resident permit fee, it's $150. So one owner's on, one owner's not, but it's also a $20 fee to apply. So looks like the total for a owner would be almost $195, and then for an absent owner would be $170. That's Columbus.
And that's
Columbus-
only good for a year, and then
That
it's
is
got to be
correct.
renewed.
Mhm.
Correct.
Yeah.
And, you know, when we look at ourselves as compared to Columbus, you know, Columbus obviously is the state capital and has convention centers and a lot of hotels and a very active hotel lobby, you know, advocating on behalf of hotels, and obviously short-term rentals take from hotels. And we don't have hotels, and bringing business in, you know, would help us. Terry,
Well, why do?
oh.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead, Jim. No, go ahead.
Why do the 2 units that we have now feel that they don't fall under the bed and breakfast part of our zoning?
I think it has to do with how we define bed and breakfast. Because I think it indicates in the definitions about actually serving breakfast or something like that. I think it has to do within.
I've read that over and over, and it says breakfast may be served, but can be the
Correct.
only meal served. Is that right, Terry?
That is correct.
Now, may makes it optional. It doesn't say shall
Right.
or will serve breakfast. So to me, they fall under that.
And they could, and that is where I kind of want to save the meat of that discussion for our next meeting, where we can discuss all of it. Because one of the options that we have is we do nothing, we modify what we have to fit this expanding scenario, or we create something for these types of short-term rentals. And so that is, you know, something we can talk about. I think when we look at like the definitions in the Columbus document where they define short-term rentals, it looks like they more or less did away with a bed and breakfast type definition and just went straight to, short-term rental, where, means the occupancy of any room or dwelling of any short-term rental, and it's for less than 30 days. And they didn't differentiate between the historic bed and breakfast and what is now an emerging business enterprise. So,
yeah. See, something that concerns me, and you in your profession would know better than I. If we license them, the person that is renting it, and they know it's licensed by the community, would think that the community is given it the okay. Everything there is okay. So it's absolutely necessary, I think, that we have the inspections, fire exits and all that stuff, because if something happens there, to me, I look at it, the lawsuit comes to the person that owns the place, the person that's managing the place, the village, because they licensed it. They pick every aspect, everything that touched that business and sue them.
yeah.
So what would be our liability if we are establishing licensing and not doing good, tight inspections there? And we don't have control of the fire or the health department. They're separate tax entities. We'd have to work out contracts with them for health and fire inspections. I don't know. Those
I
are things
noticed-
that are going through my mind.
Something in reference to your business license, Jim. The Columbus
Yeah.
document stated on their second question, Ohio requires that all businesses conducting business within the state be registered with the Secretary of State. So that's the state would license the business, not Baltimore. Okay.
And
And it also says if you rent 5 or more rooms, the state of Ohio may determine that you are a hotel. So there was some really good information on that question page, as if you were the person who were wanting to do a short-term rental.
Okay, yeah.
And, Columbus gets into the liability insurance that you're required to have also. So they got a lot more detailed.
yeah. And that could also be is something we discussed as well. The permitting, which implies inspections, versus an application of notification, so that we are aware it exists. We expect to collect income tax from it, but just notice of its existence versus permitting as well. There could be a difference there.
Is there a difference between the term of permit and license? Does that change the liability in any way?
See, the reference in Columbus was that Ohio is the authority to issue the business license, not Baltimore. Now, Baltimore could issue a permit.
Right.
Am I correct, Mayor?
Yeah. So what they're referring to is, again, in Columbus, when they came up with this, they were trying to crack down on short-term rentals because of their hotel lobby. So they wanted everybody to form basically an LLC, which you have to register with the Secretary of State. A benefit of doing that is if there is an issue, you now have someone on record with the state that you can get a hold of to talk about it, versus if there's an issue in one that we don't know that exists. But yeah, so the license, you're a recognized business comes from the state. A permit to operate would come from the village if we chose to do that.
Okay.
And it's something that you probably need to think about to discuss at the next one, because, you know, obviously some are going to be businesses, but I know it's been a year and a half since I used an Airbnb in Florida, and the guy I rented from was not a business. He was just a guy that lived down the street and had some properties down the street that he rented out. He was, you know, my payment when it went through and everything did not go to any business. Now that's Florida, it's a different state. They might have their business law set up a little different, but that's, you know, something to think about as well is, you know, Joe Schmo could put something on Airbnb tomorrow, and unless we're on it, we would never know.
This is CSA Act, you know.
So,
Or we could do like
Um,
Upper Arlington and say, we're not gonna have any.
or you could be like Upper Arlington, and,
Okay.
you know, they had their moratorium and then decided they didn't want them because it wasn't good for their community, and basically
Steve,
said
here-
no.
Yeah, they're up there by Ohio State.
Uh-huh.
And so I can see where they were concerned about a major influx of, you know,
Oh, yeah.
Party animals.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it on POW, like up here in POW, they don't have any specific stuff for it right now. But I'll be interested to see when things get back to normal if they do something, because POW, and I'm kind of surprised Dublin, we'll have to watch Dublin and see if they do anything, because there were some problems they had with Airbnbs and BBROs and stuff like that at the Memorial Tournament in
Oh, yeah.
2019. People renting out, where it used to be they would rent out their home on the golf course to people they knew or friends of friends of friends and stuff like that. Some of them just got listed, and there were a number of police-related incidents because people with no connection to anybody in the homes were able to rent them, basically. So, you know, we'll have to see or follow up and see if they've done anything since then. Again, we don't have a golf course that's pulling in hundreds of thousands of people or attractions like
Right.
that right here. So, you know, that might be, I don't think that's an issue we would encounter at this time.
So you don't think we need a moratorium, huh?
No, I don't think we need a moratorium.
Okay.
You know, we're not Upper Arlington either. So, Terry, were you able to find anything from other smaller villages or communities on what they may or may not be doing about them? I know
No.
it's harder because a lot of us don't have, you know, robust websites and stuff like that as we go out and look for them. But were you able to find any
No.
smaller towns and stuff like that?
Now, everybody that I contacted said, wow, let me know what you do. Can we see what you guys decide? Yeah, it's when I talked to James about it, that's one of the things. Everybody's taking a wait and see, what is this going to become or what is it going to do? So yeah, everybody's interested in what we do, but nobody really had a
So
standard
Pickerington
policy.
doesn't have anything?
The what?
Pickerington doesn't have anything?
Oh, I didn't know anybody in Pickerington to reach out to tell you the truth, but
I
can
don't-
do that for you. I don't
I was
think
gonna say,
so.
I don't think Pickerington does.
I looked at that.
Um,
I would have looked through their zoning codes and stuff, and I didn't see anything.
Yeah. And just like, I mean, Athens has a
They did.
a more of a long-term rental. They have a rental registry similar to the state. So the state has a rental registry in the counties that the most populous counties, if I believe it's over 270,000. If the county has more than that population, any rental property has to register with the county. Athens has adopted that for their city, something similar. Of course, they're a college town. A lot of their population is only there 9 months out of the year. And so I did not see a direct short-term rental situation there, because their rental registry kind of covers some of those provisions that we have here. And that was about the smallest community I could find that had anything, at least online, that was able to be looked at. And again, they don't really have anything for it, but
Yeah.
they also have a different community needs than we have, because
Yeah, they're very different.
yes. So
Well, it
Okay.
seems to me that the bottom line here is, what is the incentive to go forward with this for either license or permit purposes other than just being aware and for collecting tax purposes, which I think we need to look at that. But along that, one of my questions would be the hosting platforms, whether it's Airbnb or whatever, do they collect room taxes if there is a applicable room tax for that community? And if they did, then it seems to me all we need to do would be to register our community somehow with them to where they're aware. Wouldn't that just be
Right.
kind of a shortcut?
Well, and I remember when the owners were in, and Rick is still on, so if he wants to pipe in real quick and let us know if they collect the room tax. I remember them saying they collected the taxes, but I don't know if that was just sales tax or if that included the room tax. The other thing to keep in mind, though, Ken, is we also had a neighbor from a short-term rental come in, and that rental, that home is not listed on any of the internet sites. It's a word-of-mouth type site. So, but for this resident having complained to Terry about issues going on there, we would never know that this existed.
Right.
So, that might lead towards more of the application notification process, so that we know it's there, because where Airbnb may collect the room tax, and we'll find out here in a minute, and if not, definitely by our next meeting, and that person that's not renting on one of those platforms, they're not being collected for us.
Now, if I
So Rick,
remember
are you,
correctly, that particular property, we weren't sure if that was actually short-term or whether some of those were more than 30 days.
well, and that became some of the issue too, because I think if I remember that neighbor's comments on it, he talked, sometimes it's a couple of days to a week, sometimes it's more than a month. It really depended on who was renting it at that time.
Right.
So, Rick, can you clarify the Airbnb? Do they collect a room tax as well, or is it just sales tax?
To my knowledge, there is really no room tax. I mean, usually the village is like an income tax, which is basically a payroll tax, which really doesn't have anything to do with profit or loss. So what you're asking is, do they collect money from my profits? They probably don't, but I certainly don't lie to the IRS about my income. So that would also
Right. Well,
read it. So it's like
so-
this, you're confusing two
Well,
questions.
so, okay. I guess maybe a better question would be, because the village does not have
We don't
a
have a
room
bed tax.
tax established.
Right.
If the village had a room tax established, is there something in Airbnb that sets up to collect that, or is that something where it just waits until you do your taxes?
I'm not aware of anything like that. I don't believe they do. And I don't think that would be a good thing for Baltimore, because I think the people that come and stay in these properties spend money in town and are good for Baltimore. So I don't think that trying to establish a room tax when you have virtually no rooms
Right.
would grow the business. I think we're better off for
Right.
Baltimore to grow this business.
Well, and the reason I was asking was, if there's an Airbnb in Columbus, where obviously there are room taxes, I was wondering if they took care of that, whether it was up to the property owners. I'm not recommending that Baltimore have a room tax, but what I was referring to was maybe that was a way of getting notifications to the village of what properties are partaking in this.
I have a nephew that operates several Airbnbs in the short north, and I can find out if Columbus collects that room tax or if he is responsible for reporting it. I
Okay,
don't know
thank you.
personally, but I can find out before the next meeting.
Okay,
I
thank you.
appreciate it.
Okay. So do we have any more discussions right now on the Dublin study, which again was very comprehensive, or the Columbus FAQ or anything like that? Again, that hopefully the next meeting is my intent would be to set aside pretty much the entire meeting, so that we can talk about, okay, we've heard from the owners, we've heard from residents, we've looked at what other communities are doing, we've had time to think about it ourselves, we've got a few questions remaining, but then we can sit down and have the discussion of, do we need to do anything, and if so, what? Now, these first three meetings have been the information gathering part. So, do we have any more questions or discussion on?
Another thing that
Mhm.
was in the early discussion from Columbus referred to the Ohio Building Code, which has statewide regulations. And they gave an Akron as an example that has special rules for houses or rooms rented. So they have specific code provisions, and they included for like smoke alarms, fire extinguishers, heating, those kinds of things. So that would be not necessarily a regulation, but a code. Another terminology to throw out there for you, Terry.
Yes,
But,
and yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
Jim. Yeah, I was gonna say, another code, which is something then that if we were to go that route, is something we either need to gain the expertise on, or find someone or contract with someone to do, because Lancaster does our commercial buildings, but a building inspector is a licensed professional person that has some training. And so if we were to adopt something and say, well, your Airbnb has to comply with the Ohio Building Code and we're going to inspect it, we then need to have a licensed professional able to do it. And so that is creating more cost and burden on us. So,
Well, that's where, if we were to do that, that's where the permit fee would have to cover all the expenses.
yeah. Which, Terry, let's do this because we want to make sure we have an informed decision. And how much would an inspection like that cost? It might just be cost prohibitive to permit, and a permit fee to just be revenue or expense neutral for us if we're getting charged $300 for that inspection, plus this and that, it could price businesses, Airbnbs and short-term rentals out of Baltimore, but they do bring people in that spend money here. So, we obviously don't want to do that. So if Terry, you could find out what Lancaster charges since they do our inspections, if we had a building inspector that needed to come up on a case-by-case basis, what is their fee? So that,
that's a
At the-
one-time fee.
right. And so that
Okay.
and the purpose being at the next meeting when we have the discussion about, do we do this? And if so, what? And then what fees may or may not be associated, we have that information because like I said, it might just be cost prohibitive.
Or if you're concerned about your population that's coming into your community being safe, you could make that a requirement that they have to be able to provide you with the document that they had their building inspected to prove that it's up to code, and they would turn that in when they were applying for their permit. Then the burden becomes that of the owner.
Mhm. That's another option. So, but stick on with the Dublin study and Columbus and what other communities are doing. Do we have any more questions or anything we want to talk about on that right now, or do we have enough there to mull over on this for the next month or so? Obviously, if questions pop up, email them to Terry, and so we can get that information for the next meeting.
The only other thing I liked that I noted on Columbus's, under their document 1A, it gave the minimum of $300,000 liability insurance.
Yeah, and it was
Yep.
well, and to me, when I saw that was almost like a commercial property minimum liability. I know my little law office has to have $100,000 minimum liability on it. So to me, that seems almost like they're treating it like a commercial property, even when it's a residential. But
I can speak to
insurance is
that.
something we should, talk about at the next meeting. Is that's one of the things that if we want to do something, is that something we should require?
I can speak to that.
The insurance?
The insurance, I'm well beyond that.
Well,
Well,
you
beyond.
are.
I
but-
don't know if the other one is or not, but yes, I personally
Yeah.
am not going to risk my entire business on that topic.
Yeah.
So I'm well beyond that.
Well,
Yeah.
and you're thinking of
And-
your people that are coming to your business and knowing that, you're assuring them that their safety is your number one concern.
Right. So as I say, I'm well beyond the number you mentioned.
But when talking about this at the next meeting and determining whether to do something or not, it's not
Other
just
people
the
come
current
into
people.
play. Yes, absolutely.
It's the other people that may not take as much care of their buildings and may not have those level of policies. So
Which is fine.
But it's obviously if the committee decided to do something and had insurance, since you're beyond it,
Won't matter.
that's not a problem. Yeah.
Right. No problem.
So, all right.
Yep.
Do we have?
One thing, and I don't know whether it was discussed or not, was in the Columbus, they had each individual host or anybody that worked with that to be certified, and let me see, what was it? Going through the BCI, and that's I think $40 or $50 to get certified, and that's I don't know how, if we start getting more than what we have now, that's probably something we'd certainly want to do, is make sure anybody that's involved with that property has had clearance, that they're not a sex offender or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I'm looking at it. It's number 6 on that FAQ. It's $32 to get a BCI background check.
32, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that should work into this also. And if we're going to establish something, even though we are as small as we are now and know the people that are involved are personal hometown people, we probably need to put that in there for protection.
Right. Okay. So we've got I know Terry's taking notes. I've got some notes. We've obviously, a list of things at the next meeting to recap and talk about, to figure out, the first question at the next meeting is going to be, do we need to have some sort of policy in place, whether it's a modification of a current one or the creation of a new one? Do we have to have something? And then if we want to have something, what do we want to have? And that's where the rest of this will start to come in. The insurance and backgrounds and licensing and permits, applications, all of that, to determine where we go. So, let's see, I got 7:57. I'm trying to keep it short for everyone tonight. Is there any other questions or anything on the Dublin survey or Columbus short-term rental code and FAQ?
What I would like,
Uh-huh.
what I would like from committee is I would like for you to sit down and say, if I had to make this decision, what information do I not have that I should have to help me make that decision? And maybe I could put together a little matrix of what everybody thinks, so it'll be easy to look at it and say, what information do I need to make this decision? And maybe kind of list it for you and then send it out to everybody before the next meeting.
Okay.
And I'd like to say that clearly I should not be on this committee, but who is the new council member on this committee? I'm missing.
I was just looking at that, and
Vacant.
it's vacant because it was the end of the year, and
Right.
quite honestly, when the new committee or council member came on, I wasn't going to shake things up and change all the committees, and then I totally forgot that there was a vacancy on this until I started looking at stuff. So I will be asking someone prior to the next meeting to be our council representative on this.
Well, I mean, clearly it's not my choice, but I would highly recommend Brandy. So it's not my choice, but I would think that Brandy would be a great member for this committee.
Okay. And she did replace Dwayne, so.
Exactly, which
Who was
was
here,
the
so.
former member of this committee.
Right. So, but yeah, there will be a council member appointed prior to the next meeting, and whoever it is will make sure that Terry gets them all of the background information on this, and gets them caught up to speed on that. So, anything else on the short-term rentals? If not, I'll turn it over to Terry real quick for the new business on ducks.
Well, we had talked a bit at the last meeting about a request. I've gotten 2 requests now for those that want to have ducks included with our chickens, our urban chickens. I don't have anything for you because I thought this information would take up the whole meeting. it's not something that we have to decide tonight, and I can get you some more information for our next meeting.
Well,
Unless you want to talk
if-
about it.
I was gonna say, if no one's opposed, why don't we just move ducks to the January meeting so that at December, we're just discussing the short-term rentals. If it's not a pressing issue,
No.
we can move it to January if no one has any objections to that.
Terry, do your potential duck people, are they on a timeline to acquire their ducks?
No, they have options. The one lady is a new resident in town. She is building her fence, but that was already approved. So she doesn't really have the ducks yet. So I think it can wait until January.
And my daughter won't need her ducks for 4-H until, I want to say, June.
Okay.
I was going to say, Terry, was I supposed to get you information as to 4-H related duckness?
Yes, but I wasn't going to say that.
I will make a note.
Thank you, Kay.
It's online, but I will double check though.
Oh, okay. I could probably
Yeah.
go there.
Yeah, and Kay, I know you've got the connections too, but if you need anything from me on that with the 4-H stuff, let me know, because I've been hitting it online and still have some stuff to wrap up the year with them as well. So,
Okay. So you
All right.
obviously knew the possession date.
I want to say it's June, because I think the way it classifies in, it could be as late as August. I know for some of the rabbits, some of them we had to have by the end of June, and some of them we had to have by the beginning of September.
All right.
And ducks
so we still have
kind of
time.
fall in those
It
categories
depends on whether
there.
it's a roaster or a fryer.
And whether it's a pet
Okay.
or a breeder
Marker.
or a market. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
I wrote it down, Terry, so now I'll remember.
It's okay, Kay. I understand.
so, all right. Is there any other business then? If not, we got to set a time. It's left open for our December 10th meeting. Again,
And the
that'll be the
reason-
meeting.
and the-
That'll be the meeting where we discuss all of this.
Right.
So if it's left open so that we could set that time, because if we wanted
Right.
to start a little bit earlier, so in case we anticipate,
A longer
lengthy
meeting.
discussion, we're not going as late into the evening. That said, if 7 o'clock works for everybody, and if it goes a little bit later, it goes a little bit later, that's fine as well. At this point, it does appear that the meeting will be virtual based on the new governor's orders that came out earlier this week and that we're expecting next week and stuff like that. I anticipate it'll be virtual, in case that makes it is a factor in anybody's decision whether to start earlier or later.
I guarantee that I could be here by 6 because after school is technically until 6. If you want to move it to 6:30, I can make it a mad dash to my computer. But Terry, are we going to need to buy you a whiteboard that we can put in your background so you can put your big matrix on to write on?
There you go. I'll have something
Well-
ready, Kay.
I don't want to have you write on your pretty wall.
It's nice and plain. Nice and plain.
Yes.
Well, and if we get the matrix stuff ahead of time,
Yes, that's what I'd like to do.
I can always share my other computer screen as well, so everybody can see it.
Okay.
Well,
Or if it's sent
except,
out
except,
as an
except for
attachment, we
Jim,
can
who's on
open
the
it
phone.
and preview and look at it at the same time we're
As well.
Zooming.
Correct.
Correct.
Because I went back to check to see what our new business was on, as I was correct in that we were ducking it tonight.
Yes. we
Yeah.
will.
So yes, that's also an option as well. So, but I don't want you to rush. So even 6:30 is a little bit of a rush for you, Kay.
No, it's,
It-
what?
I mean, if it is, we can keep it at 7. But if you think 6:30 is good and everybody else is
6:30
good
is
with
good,
6?
if that's okay with everybody else.
6:30 is the earliest I can do.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that, does that put you in a rush, Ken, or is
I
6:30?
can- I don't have a long commute.
Yours
Yeah,
is
I
shorter
know.
than mine.
That's cute.
What about you, Jim? 6:30?
6:30 is fine.
All right, so we'll call the next one December 10th at 6:30. Start a half hour early, unless something pops up between now and then. The only item on the agenda will be, discussion of short-term rentals, Airbnbs, bed and breakfasts.
Yes. Ducks will be in January.
Sounds
Hey,
good.
just one last thing. Will the other Airbnb people be invited to the meeting? I mean, I haven't said much, and I don't think they'll say much unless there's something that you people want to ask from us. So I just would like them to be at the meeting. Is that appropriate?
And when you say at the meeting, you mean logged on like this as opposed to watching on YouTube?
Yeah, because you can't really interact on
yeah.
YouTube.
I don't
It's
have
a
a
public
problem
meeting,
with it
right?
because, well, it's a public meeting. COVID has made people realize what the definition of a public meeting actually is. The public meeting means that they have to have the option to observe, not participate. We're fortunate enough, we're a small enough community that we like people to participate. And there's only one other owner. I don't have a problem with them joining the meeting like this as well, because there very well may be a question during our discussion that we need to ask.
Exactly.
From-
That's my point.
you.
Is like I'm just
Yeah.
saying I've definitely muted and turned my video off. I've not tried to interfere with your meeting.
Yes,
I'm absolutely certain they would do as well. I think
Yeah,
that if you had a question for them, that they should be available to answer the question.
Yes.
So I'm
Yes,
just trying to say I think they should be invited.
and we have, Terry, do you have their, well, I don't know that we have their emails.
No, I don't.
I can get it for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll make sure they're on there, and that way we have that. Same with the few residents that came to speak as well.
Okay.
We'll make sure to invite them because, again, during the committee discussion, there might be questions that pop up during our discussion that we want to seek from them. We have that benefit as a small community. Larger
Yeah.
ones.
That's all. That's all I'm asking is that
Yep.
the people who are
Yep.
affected by these decisions have the opportunity to have a voice. That's all.
Yep.
Well, and
Okay.
we may think of something that's we may think it's a major concern when it really isn't, and they can keep us on the level as to appropriateness.
Exactly. They're very,
Yep.
very well versed in this. It's almost as though you can't know what you don't know. And we've had a lot more experience with this, and we just want to share our experience. That's it.
Yep.
And I appreciate it.
So yeah, we'll make sure, of course, Rick, you get it. The other owners get it. I think there were 3 neighbors that showed up at the one meeting.
Right.
that
And
they
most of
get
them
it. So
confused something else with an Airbnb. They thought you were talking about,
right.
yeah, they were confused.
So
I think that property sold, didn't it, Terry?
I think so as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that'll be the December meeting. The only thing on the agenda, so that we can have that. Our BZA members are always welcome to attend. We'll make sure they get the invitation as well, because if planning and zoning decides to do something and then there becomes an issue with it, BZA is the one that will ultimately decide it. So we'll invite them to listen in as well. All right. And then if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
I'll second that.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Oh, and I heard Jim say aye on there as well. So we will adjourn at 8:10. So That'll do this. Our next one's December 10th at 6:30. Thank you, everyone, for participating tonight. We'll get all that information out. And as Terry said, if you think of your questions and stuff so she can put together the matrix, just email it to her. And if other questions pop up, if I don't see anybody before Thanksgiving, I hope everybody has a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
So long as you're
Thank you.
not
All right.
raising turkeys.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.